hiring new employees, educating employees about drug-free workplace rules, and what to look for if you think an employee is under the influence. Before we get to today's program, I'd like to introduce and welcome a few new chamber members. If our new members would please stand and wave when I read your names, that would be great. From Solo Web Solutions, Cheryl Smith. State Farm Insurance, April Patzel-Elke. Welcome to the Chamber. We are very happy to have you with us today. Our program sponsor today is Umpqua Training and Employment. Nearly 42 years ago, a group of Douglas County citizens organized a nonprofit corporation with a local board of directors in order to be more responsive and effective in providing workforce services in our community. UT&E evolved to include contracts with public organizations, foundations, local and regional nonprofits, and businesses. For 30 years, UT&E has provided fee-for-service options for businesses, providing advanced skill assessments for promotions, apprenticeship evaluations, and personnel action development. While UT&E's footprint may be a little smaller, it is continuing to work with public and industry partners on special workforce projects, specifically to establish a long-term strategy to fund truck driver training. As businesses express their workforce needs, UT&E, with local partners, is prepared to tackle issues with innovation and efficiency. UT&E looks forward to continuing to serve the businesses of Douglas County, striving to exceed expectations. We know chamber programs are only possible with the support of our members. We want to thank Umpqua Training and Employment for its sponsorship and its president and CEO, Susan Buell, for being with us today. Our first presenter today is Ashley Anderson. Ashley started her career as an HR assistant at Umpqua Community College, which led her to human resource roles at larger businesses in Douglas County, from medical to tribal to manufacturing. Ashley is currently HR administrator with Roseburg Forest Products. Please welcome Ashley Anderson.
Good afternoon. Can you guys all hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So as you know, Roseburg is a very large manufacturer within Douglas County, but also in the United States. And having marijuana legalized back in 2015 has been hard for us. So as you can imagine, we take safety very important. So it's very committed to us, safety 24/7, not just at work, but in their homes. So we test pre-employment, randoms monthly. We do consider them sweeps if you have employees or family members there. Reasonable suspicions, and then as union members, they get tested twice within their first 6 months of employment. So as an employee within our plants, there's a lot of drug testing going on. With the legalization, we have not changed our standards. It's still DOT, so a lot of employees, that was the first thing they asked, is are we still gonna test for THC? And the answer is yes. We don't want to take the chance of someone being within our plants impaired. We have jitney drivers, we have press operators, we have just chain pullers that can be dangerous. Drug-free workforce is a better workforce. I think we can all agree with that, that if someone is sober and the right mind, they're gonna have a better morale with their coworkers, they're gonna bring in better production, they're gonna have better customer service, they're gonna have a better attitude. One thing we all have done since we enacted our drug testing back in '89 is that there has been a last chance agreement for our employees. So whether that was they had a positive within a drug test or they came forward and admitted that they have been using, we do a last chance agreement. So it's not just a no tolerance. That last chance agreement, we pair greatly with RBH, with Serenity Lane, with ADAPT, and we make sure that our employees get to that healthy being to be the best person that they can be, not just for them, but for their families and then for also their work life. In 2008 is when we started doing that random testing, and of course, you know, we got some more in there, but again, that last chance, we grew from that. Those employees are still with us. Our success rate with those last chance agreements is high. It's probably in the high 88, 89 percentile for those people that successfully complete that. 2015 comes, and of course, we're all wondering what that's going to bring us. July 1 to December 31st in 2015, our positives doubled. 73.5% of those was THC. I can specifically remember in September, I had an employee come to me saying, I'm gonna be positive. And I said, okay, you know, we're still gonna go through the phase. He tells me it's THC and that it is his right to exercise this because of Oregon state law. So of course, you know, we've had a low, so we explained it to him, he didn't understand. And we get a lot of those employees, and I get it. We get employees or recruitment, you're gonna get those employees who don't understand why we're still testing. The biggest thing for us is we explain the safety. Since then, so 16 and 17, still we're doubled. Every year we've doubled in our positives. Again, in the high 70s, we're looking at THC. So yes, we've seen an increase in other things, but THC is still the main component in that, and that's pre-employment, monthly sweeps, the reasonables, post-incidents, all of it. 2017, we did change up just a little bit on how we did our LCA process. So employees, if they've been with us longer than 6 months, they've never had an LCA before for substance, and they admitted that they were going to be in break of our substance abuse policy, then they would go into that LCA. Since then, we've had the same amount of number of employees come forward prior to testing, but then we get a lot more who don't, and so those would obviously be automatic terminations. But that has been something we've changed, trying to be more proactive. We haven't, like I said, we haven't changed our levels. It has hurt a little bit in recruiting, but again, it's all about safety for us. We want people to come to work for us in a healthy, good state of mind, and we want them to come to work and leave the way they came. Sorry about that. One thing we've always stressed is that we put our RVH out there throughout. So our monthly meetings, some plans call them glass wall meetings, is they're always telling employees that they have RVH available to them. So that way they can go out to them if they have some sort of a chemical dependency. That has actually helped us even more. And I do have to say Serenity Lane does a great job with our employees. They're always on it. The work there is just tremendous. So that partnership we have with them is going to be great. And again, a lot of it's just safety. I mean, I don't see us backing down from it. And unfortunately, it's going to be rough for us. And for a lot of you business owners recruiting future drug testing, it's going to be rough, but a lot of it is just educating your current employees, educating your applicants, letting them know ahead of time how it's going to work and how it's going to look. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Up next is Guy Norman. Guy is HR Director for Umpqua Community Health Center, specializing in development through strategic planning to identify areas of opportunity to successfully drive improvement. Please help me welcome Guy Norman.
Thank you. Gosh, drug testing and in the workplace, difficult for all of us. I have a few questions just real quickly, if you don't mind raising your hand when I ask. How many of you are currently doing drug testing at your workplaces now? Okay, good. How about criminal background checks? All right, very good. Reasonable suspicion once they're unemployed? Okay. That's great, thank you. Post-accident. And then randoms. Okay, very good. So, all right, thank you. That just helps me as I move forward here. So, gosh, hiring new employees, very difficult since the legislation passed. I come from the background of manufacturing and also distribution, so relatively new food product distribution. So trucking and CDL licensed drivers. So that's a very strict federal program, as any of you that are involved, you know that you can't deviate from that. So, but I'm going to kind of tone this towards more local approach, and so it's a tough battle. One of the things, if you're an administrative type of company, gosh, they're not necessarily safety sensitive type positions, then do we need to really test? Well, it's kind of that company philosophy, what you decide as a company, what your image, what the type of employees, their social habits, how you want to be viewed, what type of culture you want to have within your company. So some of the THC levels can be adjusted, like, okay, they're okay at this level, but boy, if they had a party over the weekend and went at this level, right, and it's stronger in their system, you know, there can be some of those adjustments with the testing procedure. But as Ashley said, very few companies are adjusting the levels based off of the history. So that's one of the options that you could do if you're having a problem getting talent and getting applicants to be able to be hired on. So, you know, I know there's probably a lesser pool for industry as well. So one of the ways that, gosh, the education piece, Ashley touched on that, is that, gosh, let them know in your job postings what's going on up front. This is what we're going to do, and still you'll have some that are positive results applied, but at least you're letting them know. Hopefully you're not spending money on drug testing procedures after the fact and they're just testing you. So sometimes that happens too. So anyway, moving on with that thought, expanding the job market, the job research, as far as where you're looking at trade schools possibly or colleges can be helpful, and to increase the recruiting successes for you as well. So internships are also a good way to increase some tapping into the school piece is where I'm after with that. At Umpqua Community Health Center, we're going to keep progressing that school internship piece to help our recruiting efforts. We haven't had that much of an issue on the recruiting piece based off of the drug testing scenario, but you never know, right? It could happen and does happen in all industries. So moving on a little bit, just increase the exposure of your promotional material of who you are as a company. Big success, a suggestion. And again, at all your on your job postings, make sure you put that in there. We are a drug-free workplace, or we test, or successful candidates will be tested for drug testing and background check, or whatever you currently have. Again, it's getting that information out to those potential candidates that you're trying to attract. So, how do you maintain it is one of the issues. Again, is establish your policies and then follow them. And follow them to a T. Back a few years back, we happened to have a person that we terminated because of drug testing, tested positive, but we did not follow our own procedures. Our policy said they must be tested at a lab. Well, over the years, we had changed the lab scenario to an on-site test. Just because we did it on-site, we did not follow our procedures. We lost that unemployment claim, and that employee was now granted unemployment benefits. So even though we had reason, we just did not follow our policy to a T. So that is crucial. Obviously, other challenges, just again, talking about what your company wants to be viewed as and your reputation for your company, I think is very important coming in. And then you hopefully will be able to attract those employees. And so again, follow to a T. So, and you're able to change the culture of in closing here, and you're able to change the culture of your company one new hire at a time, and also one termination at a time. So if you can kind of keep that in mind if you're trying to change the culture of your company or anything, move it in a certain direction, keep that in mind. Are you bringing the right and current, the good employees, the ones you want to really move your company this way on board? And also, are you offboarding those type of employees that are not falling in line with what your company needs? I'm sure we'll have a few other questions afterwards, but that'll be it for me for today.
Thank you, Guy. Our final presenter is Jerry Gjesvold. Jerry has been a consultant and trainer for companies on the West Coast since 1983. He is currently manager of employer services with Serenity Lane, where he has been employed since 1979. Jerry specializes in matters of policy and procedures related to the management of alcohol and other drug problems in the business industry. He previously served on the Governor's Advisory Committee on DUI legislation for 16 consecutive years. Welcome, Jerry.
I'm going to grab this and we'll kind of go over here. Yeah, that was 1979, folks. I'm crumpling over a little bit. I've got a little more time, but not a whole lot. Yeah, I've been doing this work for a long time, so I've seen the ebbs and flows of this issue. Back in 1998, when Oregon passed the medical marijuana law, I saw that as kind of a door opening for where we are today. Who would have thought back then that we would be where we are today? And I'm going to present some information that will give you a better idea of why we're here. And you know, as has been mentioned by Ashley, you can have a zero tolerance. That's not an issue. What I want to focus on is in being careful as you proceed through that process and don't face litigation which has already occurred and the outcomes have not been positive. So with that in mind, you know, the drug itself, it does have some benefits. There's science that's showing that the CBDs, the cannabinoids, do help children with seizure disorders. The NFL is actually even coming to the point where it's kind of a perfect storm with the opiate crisis that we're having and the opiates that people have been getting addicted to. The NFL is actually looking at marijuana as a possible replacement for pain management. Actually, marijuana does have harmful effects too, though. As you probably already know, there's two different schedules of drugs, Schedule 1, Schedule 2. Marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug. About several years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that there is no recognized medical use for marijuana, even though there's, you know, anecdotal indications that it might have. A Schedule 2 drug is one in which there's recognized medical use, but it's also got propensity for dependence or abuse. Marijuana in Oregon, if we go back in the 1970s, Oregon decriminalized marijuana, making possession of less than an ounce a misdemeanor. You got a citation, it was just like getting a ticket and paying a fine. 98, obviously, the medical marijuana. 2010, the Oregon legislature directed the Oregon Board of Pharmacy to look at and explore the possibilities of changing the scheduling of the drug from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2 in the state of Oregon. I was asked to go up and testify against them doing that. I asked when the hearing was. It was going to be on Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock. I tell you this story because it kind of depicts how this process has occurred. I got there at about 12:15. We do a lot of work with pharmacists, so they knew who I am. The receptionist said, "Hi, Jerry, how you doing? What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I'm here to testify at the hearing at 1 o'clock. So I'm sorry, we changed that. It was held at 11. We'd like had it. I was not happy about that. Measure 91 passed in 2014. Prior to 1998, it was a simple solution. It was an illegal act. So employers typically looked at that as a violation of the law, therefore it was a punishable offense. It was a disciplinary offense. Medical use of marijuana, basically you have to have a primary or a physician that's going to go ahead and recommend the medical use of marijuana for a qualifying medical condition. On recreational, all you have to do is be 21. How many recreational dispensaries are there in Douglas County now? More than there were a few years ago. The black market. I was called by no less than about 7 radio stations around the state after Measure 91 passed. Every single one of the interviewers asked me the question. You know, we've been told that if recreational marijuana passes, there won't be a black market for the drug. And we have a clinical term for that. You know what it is? Bullshit. There's a black market. In fact, about a quarter of the marijuana that's being grown legally today is going east. It's going in the black market. There was a guy, a marijuana grower here in Oregon that was arrested in Nebraska. He had $1 million worth of marijuana in the car. So if you think this isn't big business, it's big business. In Oregon, 8th and 11th graders are more likely to smoke marijuana than they are tobacco. That's a good news, bad news story. We have card holders as young as 12 years of age using marijuana medically. Public sentiment, basically, currently it's 64% are in favor of recreational marijuana, 90% are in favor of medical marijuana being legalized. Current status with the federal government, Sessions and Trump have both said we're going to be more aggressive in processing or pursuing growers in the states that legalize it. You know what all the states are saying that have legal marijuana, recreationally and medically? Stay out of our business, and you'll see why here in a minute. CBDs, again, cannabinoids, that is what has created a lot of the interest in Washington, D.C. to change it from a Schedule I to a Schedule II drug. The good news is the FDA came out about a month and a half ago. They said we are not going to change the scheduling of the drug from a Schedule I to a Schedule II drug. But here's the payoff. We are going to lift the restrictions that we've had in this country doing research. So you're going to see, because there's a lot of money to be made in researching this drug in terms of the benefits and the challenges. And there will be both, believe me. All drugs have side effects. If you take a prescription drug, for example, some of those side effects can be very severe. There's a reason why when you listen to a 30-second commercial on a prescription drug, 5 seconds tell you what the drug is, and the next 25 seconds will tell you the disclaimers. You'll hear the words fatal and death sometimes 3 times in the 25-second portion of that commercial. Obviously, as has already been mentioned, the Oregon Supreme Court has ruled that employers do not have to accommodate the medical use of marijuana. It took us almost 7 years. I served on a legislative subcommittee of a group of us that went to legislature, and it took 7 years before they made that decision at the Oregon Supreme Court that you didn't have to accommodate it. Here are the problems with marijuana. THC is fat soluble. The brain is the single fattiest tissue in the body. So you end up having people, that are chronic or long-term users of the drug. The lights are on, but nobody's home. The kinds of things that you're going to see here are complacency. I do a lot of work with employers in Portland, and the incoming or the new employee doesn't come to work a couple of days. They call them in and say, "Where were you?" In the old days, we would think of some kind of a creative excuse. I was sick, or a kid was sick, or car wouldn't start. You know what they say to them? Just didn't feel like coming. It's not like they try to lie about it. They just say, "It just didn't feel like coming." And they look at you like there's something wrong with you to think that they should be there every day. It's not in the cards. Heavy use can lead to thinking errors, difficulty learning and retaining information. Changes are a lot more subtle with this drug. It's not like a methamphetamine. It's not like one where you're going to see the changes rather quickly. And here's the issue. Make no mistake about it, this is about money. In Colorado, 2016, they had over $1 billion in sales and $350 million in taxes. They anticipate that will grow by they're selling over $100 million worth of marijuana a month in Colorado. In Oregon, the first week, recreational sales were over $11 million. The first 2 months, they generated more tax revenue than they anticipated getting in the entire 12 months. This is a cash cow. We now have states that are, Vermont being one, I'll mention that in a minute, but all of the governors in the states that have legalized marijuana, both recreationally and medically, have sent letters to the Attorney General saying, back off because of the dollars, the cash cow that it is. In the past 6 years, 9 states have legalized recreational marijuana in the District of Columbia. Medical use is 29 states. There are currently, this next year, 12 states that are looking at legalizing it in some form in 2018. Vermont was the first state about several weeks ago that legalized through the legislative process rather than even going to the voters. They didn't ask the voters to vote on it. They just passed it because they see how much taxes are being generated. And then law enforcement is starting to look at oral fluid testing for trying to make an argument for current impairment. I'm going to talk about that in just a second real quick. Again, employers that have to meet federal regulations, it's a zero tolerance, DOT, hospitals, Medicare. Here's an interesting thing that you might find about hospitals. Most hospitals that I've worked with have a zero tolerance, so you could have a nurse that would test positive for THC, that would fire or notify the Board of Nursing. The Board of Nursing's position is if there's no evidence that that nurse was impaired on the job, they will take no action against that nurse's license. They'll continue to allow her to work. And the reasons to be concerned, THC in the marijuana today is unbelievable. You take the butane honey oils, you've probably read or seen in the news these unexplained explosions. This is where people are taking butane, heating up marijuana and extracting the hash oil, or making it into a hash oil. It's over 90% THC concentrated. Kids like it because it's odorless. They could be smoking in their bedroom, parents wouldn't even know. I'm concerned about this. This is going to take some kids out of being productive entities in our society in the future, I'm telling you right now. We're starting to see 17, 18, 19-year-olds that have been using butane honey oil for 12, 18 months, and they're as bad off as somebody that's in an advanced stage of meth use. It's really bad. And that's what they call dabbing or vaping. Problems with edibles. Here's something that maybe some of you haven't thought about. We've got people using edibles at work. We had a nurse recently from Washington State working in ER, and the reason he came into treatment, he wasn't disclosed by the employer. He started becoming very paranoid because of his use of edibles, and that was what motivated him to get help. But we've got people doing that. The other thing we have people doing is they're bringing edibles to potluck. Gives new meaning to potlucks, by the way. But they're bringing edibles to potluck. There was a recent block party up in Eugene where 4 people went to the ER because they didn't know what was wrong. They were getting high on pot because the guy didn't disclose. And I do a lot of DOT CDL driver training. I tell drivers that are subject to random drug testing, you better be careful what you put in your mouth when you're at a function, social function, because it could have marijuana in it. And this guy that did this at this block party, his idea was, well, it's legal, what's the big deal? So we got people doing that. The issue around the problem is current impairment. We have a way of measuring current impairment with alcohol. I thought, back in 2012 when Colorado passed their law, somebody would come up with a breathalyzer. But as I thought about it over time, alcohol vaporizes, therefore it's in the breath. THC is fat soluble, it doesn't vaporize. So we have not been able to come up with a test that will determine the amount of THC in the blood. Even if we could, we don't have the science-based background to determine at what threshold a person becomes impaired. In Washington State, they legally passed a law that if the law enforcement officer suspects somebody's under the influence of THC, they can take them in for a blood draw. I mean, it's a law that says you can do that. We don't have that in Oregon, by the way. But so they draw, and if they have 5 nanograms in their blood, they're charged with driving under the influence of marijuana. In this state, I belong, or I'm on an advisory committee for Lane County Victim Impact Panel for driving under the influence, and I asked a couple of DREs, drug recognition experts that were in the meeting last time, are you issuing citations for driving under the influence of marijuana? I said, yeah, we are. The district attorney was in the same meeting. I said, how's it going? She said, we're losing more cases than we're winning. And she said, we can't prove current impairment. Urine testing is the favorable method of testing for THC. Every single court case that's been decided that I'm aware of has been one of presence of THC in the urine does not mean that the person was currently impaired. And then look for that sentiment to change, hopefully. Let's see, what else there? There's the Washington State. Future, we need to come up with some kind of a measure or a determination as to when somebody is currently impaired. And until we do, what should an employer do? I think it's important to take things slowly. Don't just assume as people told me before, you know, to treat it just like we do alcohol. At least at this point, we can't do that. It needs to be supported documentation, you know, so any kind of disciplinary action supported by good documentation. If you're not familiar with the AFSCME case out of Lane County, they fired a guy for using marijuana medically. AFSCME filed a grievance. He got his job back, $23,000 in back pay, and $8,000 in attorney's fees. And the three things, there's been 2 or 3 cases like this nationally, and the 3 things that all of the ruling parties have determined is, number 1, there's no evidence they used on the job. Number 2, there's no evidence they were impaired on the job. And here's the one that gets me. The penalty is too severe for the offense. That's another example of social acceptance of the drug. And then again, another thing you need to be aware of is Johns Hopkins University Medical School did a recent study in which, you know, in years past, we've always said when somebody tests positive, what's the first thing they say? I've never used a drug in my life. And then all of a sudden, when they realize that argument's not going to work, they say, well, that's right, I was in a car, or I was in a room, and somebody else was smoking. Scientifically, we've been able to say without question that that is, again, the clinical term bullshit. So, unfortunately now, Johns Hopkins University Medical School has come up with the fact that, number 1, the marijuana that's so intense out there that you can get a mild contact high from just being around somebody that's smoking it. And number 2, you can flunk a drug test for THC. It exceeds the 50 nanogram threshold cutoff. So again, something that people need to be aware of. Most employers do a 0 tolerance, and all I'm saying is you can do that, just be careful about how you do that, and proceed cautiously, having some kind of legal assistance or help to make sure that you're not getting, you know, sued for in having to defend yourself. We had a couple of cases that went up to the Oregon Supreme Court, and in both instances, the first one that went up out of Columbia Forest Products, the first question that the judges asked is, does the guy have a qualifying medical condition? Guess what? He had a medical marijuana card, but he didn't have a qualifying medical condition. Imagine that. And the second one that went up, the Oregon Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to fly in the face of federal law, so employers don't have to accommodate. I think that's it. So are we going to open everything to questions now? Is that the idea? Do we want to pass this around? Or? Well, I'll just go ahead and start if there's any questions for me in terms of, I went pretty fast.
What's the half-life of marijuana?
You know, I don't know what the half-life is, but you can be looking at, again, with the intensity of the marijuana today, somebody that will test positive for several days to several weeks. I had a case with Willamette Industries years ago. This guy was smoking a lot, but it took about 8 weeks for him to pass a pre-employment drug test or get down to the 20 nanogram threshold for a pre-employment drug test to go back to work. So it could be a long time, depending upon.
Just your estimate, and how many states are going to go completely legalizing?
Legalizing marijuana?
Yeah.
Was 12 more this year. I mean, you can see what's happening here. There was first 2, and there was 4, now we've got 12.
Yeah.
You know, it's expanding. And the thing that is really driving a significant amount of that is the states that are looking at the tax revenue and saying, we want to buy that. You know, they aren't thinking down the road in terms of, I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, I'm really concerned about our future. I'm in a determination in regards to the complacency that you're going to see. Let me tell you a quick little story, and I'm not suggesting this marijuana driven. My sister-in-law was involved in a small accident. She takes her car in to get repaired, gets it back. She's driving it home, it's making a bunch of noise. She takes it back, they didn't tighten the lug nuts on the wheels. I mean, if you're going 35 across town, that's one thing. You're going 75 down the freeway, that's another. And those are the kinds of things, if you're not already seeing. Before Measure 91 passed, if I was talking to a group like you, I would have said something like this. If you think you're getting bad service now, Measure 91 passes, you're seeing the best you're going to see. You know, there's a reason for it. You know, there's even companies that have made commercials trying to get somebody to come and help them in a particular appliance department, if you've not seen those. And again, am I blaming that on marijuana? No, but I'm sure as hell blaming it on complacency and kind of a, oh well. Any other questions for me?
Yeah. So,
please.
You're concerned about the future. Aren't there recent studies that are indicating that as adolescents or when their brain are getting formed, use of marijuana is permanently?
You're going to see a lot of airheads. There's going to be a percentage. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be a lot of young kids that are going to grow up and be very productive entities in society. There are others that are not going to be able to produce. They're not going to be able to learn.
That will be a permanent disability?
You know, whether it's permanent or not, I don't know. Obviously, for some of you that don't know, I've been clean and sober for about 41 years. But the marijuana that I was smoking back then, you'd get hurt trying to pass today. I mean, the stuff that's out there today is serious stuff. I mean, we have this big, we had and still have, by the way, method's coming back, if you didn't already know that. You know, we go through those peaks and valleys. Marijuana is going to approach what we saw in terms of what meth does to the brain. Yeah, it's not going to be pretty. That's one of the things that, you know, I went to a recent conference in which I think one of the better ideas, if you got kids at home today, you know, don't argue with them about marijuana, but beg them to wait until they're 25 to use it if they're going to, because their brains will be fully developed by that time.
One more.
Yeah.
Is there a study or scientists that would know connection with schizophrenia?
Yep. It sure is. If you didn't hear that question, is there a known connection between schizophrenia and marijuana use? Yes. Now, the study has indicated that it could be somebody, you know, a young person that has a propensity for becoming schizophrenic, and the marijuana just tends to push them over the edge. So whether it develops it or not. The other thing that a study in New Zealand or Australia, someplace, in regards to IQ, you know, it can drop the IQ anywhere from 8 to 10, 12 points. You know, you got an IQ of 150, no big deal. You got one of 90, you got a problem.
Who did that study? The one on
IQ?
What's that?
The IQ or the
No,
schizophrenia? I don't know who it was. I think it was in England. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's a pretty well-known study, however. You know, and this here, the best piece that I've come up with in this presentation that I can think of is the amount of research that will be done now in this country that hasn't been done in the past, because marijuana has been a Schedule I drug. There's a lot of money to be made in researching this drug. And I think what you're going to find is that there's going to be some good beneficial things that come out about it, and there's going to be some harmful things that come out about it. And the younger a person starts using it, the more harmful it's potentially going to be. I would say this to you as parents: if you see evidence of these vaping pens at home, don't take that lightly, because that's a high probability that they're dabbing or vaping.
Well, what's interesting too, I'm in Coos Bay, and a lot of the stores, they're advertising the different uses for marijuana. So they're finding, you know, as much as THC, well, maybe it's THC, I don't know. There's different quantities or different, what?
See, the CBDs have been recognized as being very beneficial. There was a documentary on one of the channels regarding a young girl. I mean, I don't know, she was 6, 7 years of age, but taking her from having like 90 to 100 seizures a day to less than 2 or 3. I mean, that you can't ignore. I mean, all they did was introduce CBD, you know, tincture liquid to her tongue, and I mean, that's not to be ignored.
Yeah, but CBDs don't have the THC.
They do not have THC in them. They do not have they will not create an altered state of consciousness. Yeah.
Back in the early 80s, late 70s, the laws determined that bartenders or facilities could be responsible for serving somebody alcohol. Is that going to put a business owner in some kind of liability if they turn their eye kind of wink, wink, not going to test for marijuana? Their driver goes out and kills somebody. Is there liability back to the business owner for not doing due diligence?
conceivably, I could see where that argument could certainly be made.
Have there been any case laws that have shown that across the United States yet?
I've not seen as many, obviously, with marijuana and THC as I have with alcohol. We've all seen those. But again, research is going to show. And I think what was mentioned too, you know, not only does the THC show up in the urine for quite a period of time, there's also a residual effect, impairment effect. And again, it's more about complacency. It's more about just this laissez-faire attitude of, I don't feel like working every day. You know, what's wrong with that? You know, it's just a different way of looking at life. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I saw a hand. Yeah.
Do you see the action for advertising? Like in Coos Bay, we hear all the dispensaries over there advertising on the radio nonstop.
Yeah.
So I'm worried about the kids. You know, we don't let
Yeah.
hard alcohol or
Yeah.
cigarettes be advertised like
Yeah.
that. And yet it's an insidious message. You know, when you start talking about Ashley and her experience,
Yep.
with more and more people
Yep.
testing positive.
That's right.
Has there been a study even talked about to test the effects of this on our kids?
You know, I'm sure there will be. And I was down in Southern Oregon recently, and I'm thinking about a 50-mile stretch. I must have heard 10 or 12 dispensary ads on the radio. I mean, so your comment is very well taken in that why wouldn't you take those out just like you do tobacco or alcohol? I mean, it makes sense.
Money.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing that we need to at least be aware of. These are big bucks. And there's a lot of people making some big money. The other thing that's happening, just as a caution, even in the dispensaries, you know, they have inspectors that go out to inspect to make sure that there's not mold or mildew or pesticides in the marijuana that you're smoking that's being legally dispensed. They've closed down a couple of dispensaries where they found it, number one. But number two, they don't have enough inspectors to go out and inspect all the dispensaries. So people are potentially inhaling marijuana that's got mold or mildew or pesticides in it. That's not good. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions? Nope. All right. First, I want to thank Ashley.